The Alias podcast.
And we are a go. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to episode 5 of the podcast. So a couple interesting things that happened with this whole thing. First off, there was supposed to be a guest on for this episode, but what happened was he came over, we recorded everything, and then it was a really good conversation. It was with my really good friend Jonathan Wood, and came over. It was a 2-hour conversation about Post Malone, Chapter 2, and I was really happy with how it turned out. But what happened was my computer crashed, and I lost the entire conversation. And so now I'm here re-recording it, which, it's whatever. It's a learning lesson. So something like this was bound to happen. It's better that it happened now as opposed to some point else down the line. John, I love you, man. Thank you for coming on, having that conversation, even though it's not gonna go live. It was a really good one, and we already talked that you're gonna probably be back for another episode, or a few other episodes down the line, at least probably within the next month or so, and going on into the rest of the year. But besides that, other podcast-related topics. I found out I also messed up. See, I'm just messing things up left and right. Actually, the first thing was I'm gonna say it's the computer's fault, but this one's my fault. So a little while back, I did submit the podcast for iTunes, and what happened was after I submitted it, I changed my email because I found out the email that my iTunes was connected to was an inactive email. So I went ahead and changed the email, but I think that actually messed up the request on their end and made it so it just didn't go through. I found that out probably a couple days ago, and I resubmitted the podcast to go onto iTunes. So I'm hoping by the time this episode goes live, that we very well may be on iTunes, which is good because I'm not uploading on SoundCloud anymore because they have an upload cap in terms of how many minutes you can upload to their website if you're a free member. So I'm really excited. I hope we can get onto iTunes soon because that would be fantastic. I think that'd be a great place to grow the user base, and I think it'd be a lot easier for people to tune in to instead of having to keep a YouTube video open. So, in terms of that's pretty much what's been going on in my life, and it's just podcast related stuff. Also, school still. In terms of that, I also want to add another part onto this podcast, this opening section, which is, what we're looking forward to whenever guests are on. Maybe it's not something we can go do a full in-depth analysis over, but we can still say, hey, this is going to be really cool. This is coming out. And there's a couple things that I want to just kind of throw out. I want to give a shout out once again to the Breaking Bad movie that's coming out. I'm even more hyped now than I was, say, like last week or 2 weeks ago, because now I've just kind of been rewatching some Breaking Bad clips on YouTube. And it's one of those shows that I knew was great, but I didn't remember, specific moments as well as I did back in, 2015 or 2014 when I actually saw it. So I've been rewatching clips like the crawl space scene, a lot of scenes from season 5, and I kind of want to go back and rewatch some of it before I get into this Breaking Bad movie, because we got the end of Walter White's story, and it'll be interesting to see what the end is now of Jesse's story. Besides that, I also want to say I'm super excited for the Joker movie that's coming out. I've been keeping up with. It's always interesting to see what movies are doing good at the film festivals. And at the Venice Film Festival, it's been Joker. It won the top honor as best film at this film festival, and as well as it got a 8-minute standing ovation. Everyone was going crazy over it, and there's serious, legitimate Oscar buzz for the movie, which, whenever that's happening for a comic book movie, I think that stands even more as a testament to the quality of the film, because it's a lot harder for comic book films to really be a part of that conversation. So whenever they are, it's always something to really keep your eyes or keep your ears tuned into in terms of that. So yeah, I love when comic books, they take a more gritty, realistic approach, and push the genre out in interesting ways. And I heard that's what this movie is going to be like. So I'm super excited. And I was talking about how John was going to be on for later episodes. That'll probably be one that he's on for. We were talking about that. But besides that, I was super excited for those things. Also interested to see what happens out of the Apple event. They're going to announce iPhone 11, probably, is what it's going to be called. And that's probably might be the next phone I'm getting, because I think it's time for me to upgrade. I have a cracked home button, and that's not good. And I've had my iPhone for 2 years. I have an iPhone 8. So let's get into, and also you're gonna probably hear this like squishy sound in the background. Like, you can hear it right now. That's just the chair I'm sitting on. It's kind of making a weird noise, but it is what it is. It's kind of a growing pain. I'll try to get it fixed, but let's get into the two main things of the week, which let's start off with Post Malone, and then we'll get into it, because we're going to go into spoilers. So I'm going to actually save that for the end of the video, so people can listen to as much as they want instead of having to skip through the middle of the whole podcast. So let's talk about Post Malone. Going into this album, I was excited because Post Malone is a hitmaker. And actually, you know what? Let's backtrack. I want to talk about Post as an artist first, before we go into the specific details of this project. So what I was saying earlier is, he is a hitmaker, and his ascension to where he is now in the game is been extremely fast. Come 2016, mid 2016, you might know him for White Iverson, and that's probably it. And then even then, you might not know exactly who he is. And now, you'll be hard pressed to find someone who doesn't know who Post Malone is. So he's had a crazy jump. In terms of album numbers, his Stoney sold probably around 50,000 first week, and Beer Bongs and Bentleys, which is his project that came out last year, sold 460,000 first week, which is a tremendous jump. And right now, this album projections are putting it around. I saw DJ Academics, he put his stuff out 550,000, which is still another. It's an uptick. I'll be honest, it's not as much as I thought it was gonna be. I was expecting him to put out Drake numbers, like in the upwards of 700,000, like Drake did, or Drake usually does, or even go higher than something like Damn, which Damn did 610,000 first week. I was kind of expecting to do more than that, because I feel like Post Malone's such a household name now. But those are predictions. Those predictions are they're not going to be 100% accurate all the time. So we'll see where that goes. And I see it very well being higher than 550,000. So yeah, now going back to my thoughts going in, Post Malone, he's really good at making good sounding music. It's not like the most deep music. The production isn't always the most complex. It's just good sounding music usually, and he's good at doing that. And going into this project, I wanted something that was, I wanted the hits. I know Post Malone's good at bringing those, and that's what I wanted from him. And because let me backtrack. Sorry, it's a little bit hard. I'm always used to having someone bounce off of me now, because I haven't been by myself since the first episode. But the hits are what, like I was saying, the hits are what I was really going into this project expecting, and I actually think I got more than just that out of it. So now that I've listened to the project, and I've listened to it about 3 to 4 times, the music, the catchiness of it is a lot more subtle than something like Beer Bongs and Bentleys. and it's a little more akin to Stony, but it's different from all that. All of his albums are different. There's a sound that's different to all of them. Even though if it's not super different, there are differentiating factors between all three. And this is the first album out of the stuff he's put out that I feel like he's really picked up and ran with his own sound finally, where with his other albums, Stony is a lot more in that realm of trap and hip hop, and Beer Bongs and Bentleys is very much an album that I felt like he was going after the hits on that one. And this one, I feel like he's still, making hit songs, but it's not necessarily the priority this time around. It sounded like he was making music that he might listen to himself or he enjoys making. And, it does sound good because he's Post Malone, but that's not the main thing maybe he was thinking going in recording these songs. I think that, he's making music that he's going to enjoy for himself. And he's really carved out that lane for himself now, which is, what any artist should do. They should find something that differentiates themselves between other artists whenever they ever do anything. Now, my favorite songs on the project, I would say, are Enemies, Take What You Want, and Myself. Those are probably my three favorite songs. And that's not saying all the other songs are bad. There's actually out of all of the 17 songs, I have about 13 or 14 on my Apple Music. The only ones I don't have are Saint Tropez, Internet, and I think it's called I Can Tell. It's the second to last song, whatever that song is called. Those are the three songs I don't have on there, and those are my least favorite. I think Saint Tropez is a really strange choice as the second song on the album, because I feel like Hollywood's Bleeding, the intro track, gets started, and then it kind of goes back to a halt with Saint Tropez, which is honestly, I think, a really bad song. The lyrics are awful, and it's just, I don't know, it's a song that doesn't feel like it goes anywhere. And then I feel like with Enemies, that energy picks back up that Hollywood Bleeding really kicked off. In terms of features, we have SZA, Lil Baby, Meek, Halsey, Future, Young Thug, and I think everyone had a really good place with the features, except I would say honestly probably Meek Mill and Lil Baby. Not saying that their performances were bad on the road, but I feel like the vibe that Post starts with that song, Meek Mill and Lil Baby don't really carry on. They kind of start slowing things down, which is weird to say from a feature, because usually whenever you get a feature on a song, usually the energy that's coming with the feature is going to be more upbeat, and it's bringing a lot more energy to it. But funny enough, they're actually slowing down that energy that Post is bringing on his own song. So I think those features were kind of misplaced. But all the other features were really good. Especially the Ozzy Osbourne and Travis Scott song. That could have been a total meme, but I think Ozzy actually came through with a really good vocal performance. And it can be kind of hard to take Ozzy seriously because he's kind of a walking meme sometimes. But I think out of all the songs on this album, besides the ones that have already gone mainstream, I think that song and what is it? I'm trying to think. That song and Enemies are probably the two that are most likely to go mainstream, if I had to take an educated guess at it. And I think those are like the two most popular on streaming services right now, so it kind of translates pretty well usually in that regard. And then one thing I was surprised to see was seeing Sunflower on the album. It makes sense because streaming and stuff like that, but it's still a little surprising. It is still, I really like Sunflower, but I know some people might be sick of that song because it's been out for almost close to a year. And then, as I was saying, in comparison to his other works, I feel like he is picking up on his own sound, because there are some sounds that aren't the type of stuff you would necessarily pick up on today, like what was in his older albums, because there's songs like Allergic that have more of a rock vibe to them, and I like it. The beat in Myself sounds like something out of a vaporwave track, so it feels like he's still taking those influences from those other genres, but instead of him being a chameleon, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, him being a chameleon and fitting into those things, like, hey, I can making that more trap oriented record and making a more pop oriented record, I feel like he's taking those sounds and he's making them his own. He's really adding his own spin to it. He's putting them in his own lane now, and I think he's doing a really good mix of everything, from these modern sounds to even sounds that sound older. Like I was saying, Allergic. Allergic sounds like a song that could have came out in the mid 2000s, in the era of pop rock. It's got the interpolation of something like that, I feel like. So I think that's where this album really shines, and why it stands better than, let's go into the rankings of these albums. I think it's better than Beer Bongs and Bentleys, and I think over time this could be my favorite Post Malone album, to be completely honest. But right now I'm gonna have to put it at second place, because I think it's too early to say, hey, this is the best album of his. Right now I'm still gonna put Stoney at first, and if I'm gonna rank this project, I'm gonna go ahead and give it an 8.5. I think it's a great project from him, and I think him making it, being a little more subtle with how he took the songs. He wasn't going full pop, he wasn't going like full trap. He was really doing a really good blend / mixing act with these genres, and I think it worked out in his favor a lot, and it was really nice, combination of everything put together. And actually, going back to one thing that I wanted to mention, that song The Internet, it pretty much is as an interlude on this album. I was actually gonna have Kanye West, and I think that would have been really good. I think because that song just feels out of place. I know a lot of people are like, that's a minute-long song, what's up with that? But I think that's a funny story worth throwing out, that Kanye was originally going to be on that song, and that song leaked, and it's an older song, if I remember correctly. So it's an 8.5 out of 10. Enemies, Take What You Want, Myself are my three favorite tracks. Take What You Want is probably going to be the one that I think could be really big besides Enemies. All the features did pretty good for the most part, besides Meek Mill and Lil Baby. And yeah, I think Post Malone did a really good job. I think good inclusion. It was kind of weird going into it thinking, hey, there's 17 songs and we already heard 4 of them, but it works out. I do like Staring Under. I didn't say much about SZA's song, but Staring at the Sun is a really good song too. But it sounds a lot like Sunflower, which is probably the one knock I'd put at it. But I love Sunflower as a song, so Staring at the Sun also works out. So yeah, there you go, 8.5 out of 10. Really good outing from Post Malone, and if he keeps this up, this releasing an album once every 14 to 16 months, he could keep up this upwards trajectory a lot, and I think he could be someone like Drake, someone who's had a really long course run in their career. And I think Post Malone's already a staple name. It comes down to how long he can keep it up, because that's the hardest thing to do. Once you're at the top, how long can you stay up there? And I think he's give it a little more time, and he's going to be in that echelon of people like Adele, Ed Sheeran, Drake, Taylor Swift, and stuff like that. So good on Posty. Okay, so now let's talk about the movie release of the week. So now let's get into It Chapter 2, which is one of probably the most anticipated movies of the year. I'm saying that because It Chapter 1 is the highest grossing R-rated horror movie of all time. I maybe even take away R-rated, just highest grossing horror movie of all time. So it would make sense why the sequel would be highly anticipated. And I'm excited to talk about it because I think there's some interesting things worth covering about this movie. And I was very excited going into it too. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Oh, jeez. Let's talk about it. So story takes place pretty much right after Alias. Okay, I take that back. Not right after, but it takes place picking up from where the first one left off. So it takes place 27 years after the end of it. But the starting scene of the movie is actually the very last scene of it, which is worth mentioning, I would say. But the movie takes place 27 years. Pennywise is back, and it's up to the Losers Gang, which, they're adults now. They're all in their, I think they're all, in their 30s? Or they might be 40, I think. Yeah, they're in their 40s. And they have to come back to Derry, and they have to take out Pennywise once and for all. And they have to go and do certain things to get that to happen, but that's pretty much the plot of the film. It's not a very complex plot, to be completely honest. That's really, they come back to Derry, they have to stop Pennywise, and they have to do some things to do it, and that's what the movie's about. Which, having a straightforward plot is never a bad thing, but there can be issues that could come up with that, and I'll go into that a little bit later. But let's start talking about the characters, which is very important because, once again, the characters are the heart of this film, just like they were in the first movie. The Losers Club, that dynamic that they have, it's still very, very strong in this movie. Not as good as it was in part one, but, and I think that's just because the kids are just more interesting characters. Just being in that predicament, that horrifying situation as a kid, is just something that's more interesting to see happen or go through than having adults be in that situation. And all the the casting I thought was pretty good for the most part. Bill Hader, people, and the three main people I'd say, Bill Hader, Jessica Chastain, and James McAvoy. Yeah, they all did pretty good. Bill Hader definitely doing the best out of everyone besides Skarsgård as Pennywise. But overall, the cast did pretty good, and just trying to replicate how they were as younger kids, they were pretty spot on with that. It was nice to see that dynamic happen again. From there, let's get into I just talked about a main pro with the film. Let's talk about a really big con for the movie, and that is going to be its runtime. Now, going into this film, there's a lot of talk about, this movie's 2 hours and 45 minutes. What's up with that? And I don't have a problem with long movies. Sometimes the best movies are the longest ones because they have time to, flesh things out. But I'm gonna be honest, I don't think that this film used its runtime effectively. I think that they either could have cut down on how long the film was by a good amount. I think this movie could have been around the same length as the first one, which was 2 hours and 15 minutes, and it would have been a better movie for it. Or what they could have done with the 2 hour 45 minute runtime is utilized it for more interesting topics. I don't want to spoil anything, but I think that the middle portion of this film drags this movie down a lot. There's a very good 45 minutes at the start, and there's a good 45 minutes at the end, but that hour and some change in the middle brings this movie down a lot. There was times I was sitting in this theater and I was just thinking that, man, this is really boring, and I want them to just get to the next thing. And a big issue with this film is, look, it's 2 hours and 45 minutes, and like I just said, the plot isn't very intricate. It's a pretty straightforward plot. So, they have time to focus and flesh out the characters, and what happens is they do spend time, spend a good amount of screen time on each character, but the actions that all these characters are involved in are just very repetitive to keep it straightforward. So, like I said, my favorite thing is, Pennywise, the characters getting back together, all the dynamics of the film, the comedy in the film. And then my least favorite thing is definitely the runtime in the middle of the movie, where the film definitely drags by a lot. And even the sad thing is, the best prose of this film, they don't match the prose, the quality of the prose of the first film. The dynamic is great in this film, but it's better in chapter 1. So that's something to keep in mind. And also, this could be a negative for people, but I didn't think the movie was too scary, and people can take that as issue, but I didn't think the first one was scary either. I didn't come to see this movie to be scared. I came to see it because I am interested in the story and the situation and the predicament that these characters are in. So, giving a rating of this film, I would, and just for reference, I would rate the first one an 8.5 out of 10. I would go ahead and give part 2 a 6.7 out of 10. And it's a big drop because I think the movie has serious pacing issues, and the highs aren't as high as the first movie, and the lows are lower than the first movie. So that's something to keep in account. And let's go ahead and hop right into the spoilers. So, the main thing, let's go back to the story. Let's start back from the top. They all come to town besides Stanley. Stanley ends up committing suicide. And, I was fine with that. Stanley was probably one of the least interesting characters in that bunch to begin with. But, he kills himself because they play it off, or they try to make it, at first it's like, he was just so shocked by what happened in Derry the first time around. But I don't really like how it goes by the end of the movie, with that being, that he kind of took one for the team. He died to unite everyone because, I didn't think, him being dead was, once they got his artifact, was that big of a talking point amongst the group. So I liked how I was kind of okay with that at first, but how they ended up playing off of that whole situation, I wasn't the biggest fan of. From there, I also mentioned that, the acting was for the most part very good. But there's one character that I thought was awfully cast for one, and I thought that the performance was terrible too. And that is the bully. The bully from the first movie. I'm forgetting his name. He's back in the second one. Somehow he survived the fall, and down the well in the first movie. He's back, and his arc in this film is just atrocious. It makes no sense. Or it makes sense, but it's just stupid. So he gets sent to like a mental asylum, gets broken out by Pennywise, and then goes and stabs stabs Eddie in the mouth, and then gets gets killed by Richie after he attacks. I'm forgetting his name. Hold up, let me look it up. Sorry, gotta have this character list pulled up. So, because there's a good amount of characters, I'm forgetting their names. Mike, yeah, when he attacks Mike, and then Richie saves him. So breaks out of jail, stabs someone in the mouth, and then attacks someone else, and then dies, which was pretty lame. I think they could have totally cut out that character from the movie, and nothing would have been lost. Beverly's character kind of annoyed me in this movie. That's another thing that's worth pointing out. The whole love triangle between her, Bill, and Ben was really terribly executed. Because Ben's trying to make all the moves. In the first movie, and then it seemed like they were trying to make a big deal out of the fact that Bill and Beverly end up kissing. And then come the second movie, she's just still in it about with Bill. She's all about that Bill. And then at the very end of the movie, she realizes that Ben wrote the letter, and then she's like, oh, okay, I'm all about that Ben. I knew that Ben was gonna end up with her because he got kind of buff. He lost that fat and he got buff. And I was like, oh yeah, they didn't do that for no reason. He's in it to get that Jessica Chastain. he's doing it for a reason. There's a reason why he came back buff. That's why it happened. So he could get Jessica Chastain at the very end. But besides that, I thought that love triangle was terrible, and I rolled my eyes every time anything came up about it. I was like, oh my god, come on, like, just get on with something else. There's so many more interesting things to focus on than this. The other thing is, in terms of, now let's get into the middle of the movie, which is the part that I have such an issue with, and that is, when they have to go get their artifacts. Every single scene, every single time, something goes on. When they go and get their artifacts, it's a cycle of repeating the same stuff. It's, hey, we're gonna show up at this spot. There's gonna be a flashback of the younger selves. Younger self is gonna get scared, and then it's gonna cut back to the older self, and then the older self is gonna get scared. And when there's like 5 or 6 of these guys, when that happens twice per person, and that happens 10 times, like, that's just, it starts getting ridiculous. And people can say that that's in the books, but there's stuff that they've cut out of the books before, and altered from the books. So I think it's silly to say that they can't change that because it's in the books. And speaking of things that they changed, Richie's gay in this, which is fine. I think it's actually better for his character. I think it adds a little bit more of an arc to him, that he has this secret that Pennywise knows, and adds a little bit of dynamic between him and Stanley, because they hint that Stanley was that him and Stanley had maybe some sort of intimate relationship, so that's something that they changed. And then also, I will say another issue is that comes up for me is the fact that it feels like a lot of the same ground is being covered as the first film, like in terms of what is going on, like in terms of the events that are happening. Like, the first movie, before they really start getting into fighting Pennywise, it's kind of scenes of them all getting scared by Pennywise, all this stuff's happening, and then they're like, hey, you see the clown, we have to go take out the clown. And then in this film, it's the same thing. They're getting the objects and they're just getting scared by Pennywise, and then they finally get the stuff and they're like, okay, let's go fight the clown. And it could, in one end it's cool because you get to see more of Pennywise in action, but at the same time I think in the end it brings the movie down more than it brings it up, because that whole part of the movie, that whole hour middle point, is so repetitive, in terms of that, the same stuff's just happening over and over again. And then this other thing, what is it, the characters forgetting what was happening, that could explain this next thing, which is they realized come the end of the first film that they need to just let Pennywise be scared, that they have to just scare Pennywise or make him feel small. They figure that out by the end of the first movie, and then they totally forget it come this one until the very end again, where they go through this entire fight with this spider Pennywise, and then at the very end they're like, oh, we just got to make him feel small. It's like, yeah, you did that during the first movie. Why did it take you this long to realize to do that? And then this time they do it for real because they rip his heart out. And then I'm trying to think of other things. Oh yeah, and then also literally in terms of hitting the same beats, they also end up going to the same house. They fight him in the same location, just a little bit lower in that place. And then also I didn't like how had that whole peyote trip scene, whatever the hell that was, where Bill's tripping balls and they're explaining Pennywise's background. I thought that was really poorly done, and that's kind of another thing with this film, was I thought going into it that they're really gonna explore Pennywise's history more, and if them exploring Pennywise's history was that trip scene, then that was really poorly done in my opinion. Yeah, because I want to know, what's going on. Like, why is he a clown? Why, there's clearly something with dairy and the circus, and I wanted to know more about that. And it seems like the director said that there's stuff that wasn't, in the story that they could come back to and explore at a later time in another movie, which is kind of lame to me, to be completely honest. I think, like, hey, if you're telling the saga, like, just put it in this movie. It seems a little scummy and corporate to say, hey, we're saving this stuff for another film. Like, even if that's your intent, just don't say it. Don't tell us that, because it just comes off bad, in my opinion. So, and it seems like I'm being harsh on the movie, with the spoiler section, but it's easier to talk about the positives in something than the negatives in something like this, with a movie that people are probably going to be sensitive to spoilers. But yeah, I think one thing that's worth pointing out is, I think they could have, and in terms of the stuff where I was saying, they could either shave that time off or reutilize it. If they cut it out, I think they could have cut out, the whole, like, they could have cut out a lot of the flashbacks in this film. I think the whole going back in time, being in the present, going back in time, being the present, took a lot away from the pace of the film, and the flashbacks just kind of got obnoxious at a certain point to me. I think they could have cut out a lot of the flashbacks of this film, and this movie would not have lost much or anything from it. If they didn't want to do that, I think what they could have done is, or like if they still wanted to be a long 2-hour 45-minute epic, I think that time that they would save from cutting out flashbacks, they should have put into exploring Pennywise's history and his background a little bit better than how they did now, because that whole scene with the trip just felt extremely rushed, and I wasn't a big fan of it. So I think that's probably going to be about it. That's kind of all I can think of. I did come off a little negative, but in the end, I walked out of the film and I thought it was just okay. I didn't think it was great like the first film, and I listed my issues out now, so people can hopefully relate. Maybe once they watch the second film and then they watch this and the spoiler section, they can understand maybe where I'm coming from. So yeah, a little bit shorter episode today, guys, because I didn't have someone to bounce off of, so I just checked. It's pretty much around the same length as the first one, the first episode. And when you don't have someone to go back and forth with, you're gonna kind of get more to the point with things and maybe not explore things as much, because I've just been talking pretty much constantly for 40 minutes, so I kind of got to keep rolling with it, and I don't have necessarily as much time to think on it, but it is what it is. I hope you guys were okay with the shorter episode where I was just kind of rolling off and talking about stuff, and there you go. We'll see where things go from the rest of the next few episodes. I'm curious to see, Joker movie, I'm gonna be looking out for that. Same with Breaking Bad, like I was saying earlier. And yeah, I'm hoping it gets on iTunes, because I really want to get on iTunes. I'm really excited about that. So thank you guys for listening. Please, spread the word. The more people that listen to this, the better, in my opinion. So thank you, and have a nice day, guys.